afternoon, and welcome to Next Tech's proposed rule MIPS 2025, what you need to know. First and foremost, want to welcome you. My name is Heather Miller, and I'm one of the MIPS consultants here at Next Tech. If you're new to Next Tech, happy to have you here. If you've been around, you know familiarity of this is the time of year we get excited about all the new stuff coming. Also with me is Christy Brantley, my tag team partner, also going to be joining us for that Q&A, and Megan Canterbury, who is another one of our MIPS consulting team members. There's 3 of us now that all just get all hyped up off this MIPS game. So welcome, everybody, and let's kind of just talk about a little bit. First and foremost, just to confirm, the information provided in this webinar does not and is not intended to constitute any legal or other advice. Instead, it's all information, content, and materials for general information purposes only. Information in the webinar may not constitute the most up-to-date legal, financial, or other information. Webinar attendees should contact their attorney, financial, tax, or other advisor to obtain advice with respect to any particular matter. This webinar does contain links to other third-party websites. Any such links are provided only for convenience, and Next Tech does not recommend or endorse the content of those third-party sites. So just a quick disclaimer there. And then another disclaimer also is you will be receiving, for being a registered attendee, a link to an on-demand recorded version of this. So that's going to be important for you to be on the lookout for. So if you wanted to share this with any other team members, or again, need to watch it at a later basis, you will be getting that access. And also we will be taking questions throughout the webinar through the GoToMeeting link or the GoToMeeting meeting add-on. And Christy's going to be kind of managing those as we go through the main content. And then at the end, we'll go through some Q&As as a group so we can kind of cover anything. If it's a question for one, it might be a question for many. So that's what we're going to do at the end. So talking about our agenda, first and foremost, we're going to start off with those MIPS proposed changes for 2025. We also are going to look at the MVP or MIPS value pathways. We're going to talk about why you should continue reporting MIPS in 2025, and then we'll have that live Q&A with your MIPS experts. So to get everybody started, keep our brains up, I'm going to do a quick poll question. So I'm going to put out this poll and wanted to kind of just know how familiar everybody is with the MIPS program. Let's see if we've got a bunch of smarties today. All right, so this is going to be fun. We've got about a 50-50 here. We've got 53 familiar, 38 somewhat, and 9 not familiar at all. So we've got some newbies, and we've got some veterans, and then we've got some rookies. So that'll be great. Hopefully by the end, you'll have a good understanding of these requirements and maybe some questions to clarify. So let's jump into these changes for the 2025 proposal. So performance threshold. So the threshold over time has increased. You know, back in 2017, we started at 3 points. We got up to 75 points here in 2024. There was, in the ruling last year, a projection for it to increase to 82. Lucky for all of us, it is still proposed to maintain at 75. They are looking at utilizing the mean final scores from 2017 reporting year. And they intend to maintain this all the way through 2027 until we get more recent data that better reflects patient performance due to COVID. So by statute, they have to use a previous year's median score. And with COVID, scores are kind of, they're not really believing that it's consistent data. So in this proposed rule, it does project out all the way to 27, so the next 3 years. All right, so this is the 75 threshold, like I was saying, and then we're going to have this threshold projected all the way through year 2027 for that bottom line to avoid penalties. All right, so reporting options. We still have traditional MIPS. We do have MIPS value pathways, which is now voluntary. We'll talk a little bit more about those details. We have alternative payment models for anybody that's associated with an APM. And then alternative performance pathway, which is our APP model, which is a little bit more where they're conforming the quality measures for those performance pathways. So 4 different ways that we can report MIPS. Now, each of these different reportable methods have different performance weights. So the bulk of everybody, I'm pretty much attending the call, is probably reporting under traditional MIPS. So we've got our 30% quality, 30% cost. Oh no, am I still breaking up, guys?
No, Heather,
Okay.
I don't, you're perfectly clear on my side. If anybody else hears breaking up, then if you can just put it in the, okay, so some more people are coming through saying that you're breaking up. I can hear it perfectly fine, but I have.
Okay, we're just going to keep going. I think I'm getting confirmation that most are able or are hearing me, so I'm going to keep going, and hopefully those connections get corrected. Okay, perfect. Thanks for everybody's feedback. Really, really appreciate it. So we've got our 30% quality, 30% cost, 15% for improvement activities, and 25% for promoting interoperability. And you'll see if you were to reweight the cost category for APM entities, their numbers are a bit different. And again, the standard small practice. So these are our category weights that we are looking at. And again, the most popular with the MIPS reporting is going to be the standard, and there are no changes in this 2025 category for next year. Again, payment adjustments are still at 9% with a 0% adjustment at that 75% threshold. Anything above it would be, again, determined by how much negative we have. So we definitely know the negative in 0 to 18 points, 9% penalty. From that 18.5 all the way up to 75, it's a sliding scale based on, again, how close you get to 75. And then 75 to 100 could be any adjustment based off of that bucket of negative dollars. So we could see adjustments. I know last year we saw them at 8.25%, but that was with the exceptional performance feedback. I don't know if we'll get that high again, but always every point counts in this game of payment adjustments. So looking at the quality category, it is still a 12-month reporting period. We still have 6 quality measures, one in which is high priority or outcome. 75% data completeness. This is meeting the data completeness threshold by reporting a minimum of 75% of your eligible instances for each measure for the entire reporting year. So this is critical for successful MIPS reporting, and it is by measure. So it's not just one measure. All measures, you need to make sure that you're giving CMS at least 75% of those total eligible instances. In the proposed rule, it does maintain the 75% data completeness all the way through reporting year 2028. So we're looking at some nice verbiage in this new proposed rule with thresholds all the way through 29 at 75, and then also 75% data completeness through 28. So we are going to see some stability in the program, not a lot of up and down if all of this does pass in the final rule. So something that is also changing in the proposed rule in quality is to remove the 7-point cap for specialty measures, and this will be determined annually. So some of you might have been feeling the impact of measures being topped out and then having minimal measures for you to choose outside of those topped out measures. One of the measures that we see impacted and proposed for 25 is the melanoma reporting measure for our dermatologists, which is measure 397. It is being proposed to be one of the measures that they do remove this 7-point cap. And what it will do is it will then do this defined benchmark where you'll maintain your point values based off of the performance rating we see here. So this is great news for the derms that you would now still be able to get a 10-point value, even though it's technically a topped-out measure. They state every year they will provide the list of measures that do get approval to remove, again, the 7-point cap if there are limits to your choice of measures. So this is great to see, particularly for those that are feeling the heat of those topped-out point measures. Okay, so outside of that in quality measures, we're going to see the addition of 9 new quality measures. They are proposing removal of 11 quality measures, and then we're going to see substantive changes to 66 of the existing measures. So this is just always good to know that every year they do quite a few changes in the quality measure content. So let's look a little bit on the proposed changes for our new quality measures. Most of these, based off of the specialties served by NextTech, aren't going to be too relatable, other than the melanoma tracking and evaluation of reoccurrence. This measure really is not going to be too new, as it's just replacing the removal of the melanoma continuity of care recall system. So they're kind of taking one down, putting a new one up, just making the logic a little bit easier to follow. And then these are the other 10 measures outside of that that are being proposed for removal. Again, none of these very pertinent to our specialties here at NextTech, but just a good understanding of the 11 that they are requesting proposed removal of. So proposed changes to the substantive changes to some of the measures that are commonly used with our NextTech accounts. For the diabetes A1C, they are going to give it a new title. And then also, if the glycemic test assessment is in the medical record, the test can be used to determine the numerator compliance. So I know that a lot of people with patient-reported A1C that's how you're getting the information. This new change is going to intend that the test needs to be within the medical record of that A1C level. So just something to consider if you're reporting this, that you would need to have the details of that test. The diabetic retinopathy communication to the primary, not much change other than they're going to remove the MIPS CQM collection type. In NextTech, we have it as an ECQM, so this will not impact the ability to report this measure. If you were in other systems that don't have it as an ECQM, then this measure would no longer be reportable under that reportability type. For diabetic eye exam, they're just removing some encounter requirements for an inclusion of fertility illness. So just some basic things there that could remove a patient from being included in the measure. One of the changes also is closing the referral loop for the receipt of the specialist report. This is nice because a lot of times we have people ask, what happens if the patient never does attend those appointments? And it's added some verbiage about something that you receive from that referred provider that states the patient did not attend the appointment, and it is being provided to that referring eligible clinician. So it's not been very clearly stated prior that this was an acceptable way to close that loop, and now they've just added it to the actual measure requirements that this is acceptable way to close the loop if the patient doesn't attend. For those that report the functional status assessment for total hip, they are just amending the time frame. It's November of the year prior to August of the year prior. So this is just an encounter time frame change of where they're pulling the data from. Same thing with the psoriasis measure and dermatitis measure for itch severity. It's just going to be during the performance period that this is being completed. So just some verbiage changes on those 2 measures there. For doc of current medications, we do have a change that could impact the bulk of us that are reporting this measure. It's been revised that the documentation could be completed on the day of the encounter versus within the encounter time, and the age criteria is being removed. So this will now be done on all patients regardless of age, and you do have within the day to complete the documentation versus within the note. For high-risk medications, they did update the list of risk medications to align with this 2023 AGS Beers criteria, and then that's going to look like this. So certain things were removed, and added for those type of medications. So this is just some details of what they have modified in the medication list. All right, so let's jump to promoting interoperability. It is still, 180 days. That changed last year. So no changes in the reporting period, any consecutive 180 days. And we still have 4 reporting objectives that are consistent to what they were last year. We still have to do the yes attestation to using a certified edition of your software. You also have to attest to no information blocking, that you will accept a direct review. We also have our security risk analysis, which is again part of HIPAA. So make sure, regardless of your MIPS eligibility, you are doing those security risk analysis. And then we do know that the SAFER guides as of this year have become required that you report yes to that high priority practices. In the past, we were given the ability to do yes or no, and now we want to make sure that we are doing it regardless. It is required attestation of completing this component of the SAFER guides. If you were to Google SAFER guides, these are web-based. You can click on them. It'll take you right through to a worksheet that you can document all of your needed data on. So it's pretty useful guides. Other small changes, we are looking to add the exclusion for the PDMP requirement that did change in 24, that there is a new exclusion about not electronically prescribing any Schedule 4 2 to 4 drugs during the reporting period. Previously, there was no exclusion that verbally said you did not do it. It was, you had to add it under the cost burden. So this will be something that is new that can easily be checked off if you are not prescribing any Schedule 2 through 4 drugs. We still have a small practice reweight still available in 2025, giving that automatic reweight if you accept it. If you are to produce any data, it would trump that small practice hardship. So you want to make sure you're aware of any data being submitted so that you don't get points submitted incorrectly. And again, that 180 days. One of the other changes in the promoting interoperability is previously, if you reported from more than one method, you would get scored at a 0. So if you submitted data at the registry level and you submitted data with your manually through the QPP website, they would then cause you to get 0 points. So they've now added, similar to how they did in quality, if you report on multiple submissions, it will take the one that produces the higher score. So that's just some verbiage in the rule that does talk about multiple submission types and it not causing that 0 score that it was causing previously. So just be careful of that. And then here's our promoting interoperability. No changes to any of this point values. Everything looks the same. We've got our 4 main measure components and the point values still equal to 100 with bonus points for any QCDR integrations, public health, or syndromatic surveillance reporting. So you still can get those bonus points there. But other than that, looking good. Improvement activities. So we still have a reporting period, any 90 consecutive days. Also completion of activities based on practice size for 50% of total providers. So one of the big changes in this is there are looking to add 2 new improvement activities, both really, again, not something that we're going to see with the specialties with NextTech, but on the removal, we are seeing 8 improvement activities removed and 3 in which are probably very popular methods or measures, activities that a lot of our groups are using, particularly the 24/7 access. We also have the referral loop closing, and we also have the timely communication of test results. All 3 of those I know are used by a lot of our MIPS consulting clients, so be aware that these will be going away next year. And if we want to know why, the main reason is they're obsolete. The activity is no longer something that really is an added. Everybody seems to be doing it. So they've determined them to become obsolete and not a true improvement activity for those practices to report on. Others is it might be a duplication, so they've taken them out. But for the main ones we're looking for, Pretty much they've just become either obsolete. This one is very similar to what we're already tracking in other categories. The good news is with the two new activities also are coming. One is the COVID-19 vaccine achievement for practice staff. So this would mean that you have a certain percentage of your staff that have the vaccination for COVID-19. Also then 80% for influenza. And then I think hepatitis B, you have to have 95%. So this is something new. You could decide that this is something your practice wants to report on. And then we have the engagement of patients through implementation of a patient portal. So this is a current measure. It is modifying just off the new title. And the new title is a new patient portal. So in order for you to report this measure, it's no longer implementation of, you would need to actually put in a brand new patient portal that your patients would then be engaging in bidirectional information exchange. So two measures that are just getting a little bit of a tweak and possible additions you would want to consider. Now, what's really being changed is that they are eliminating the weighting of activities. So currently, if you're a small practice, we have to choose one high or two mediums. And then again, if we're large practices, we have to double that and either do 2 high, 4 mediums. And so they are removing the weights and decreasing the number of activities. So now if I'm in a small practice or MVP reporting, I only have to do 1 activity. And then in a large practice, I'd have 2 activities. So we no longer have to worry about, is it high weighted or medium weighted? Pretty much if I'm a small practice, I pick 1 activity, 50% of my providers are completing it, we're done. Large practice, same thing, but we just have 2 activities. You would need to demonstrate with that data validation that 50% of your providers are completing those activities. All right, let's get into cost. So cost, again, 12-month reporting period. Nothing that we're reporting manually through reports or a registry. This is claims-based submitted. This is also going to see 6 new episode cost measures added to the list. Nothing really that's going to truly impact many of the next tech accounts. We've got a kidney, prostate cancer, rheumatoid arthritis. Also, these coming with that 20 episode base minimum. But the main change that we're going to be seeing that might have some impact to next tech accounts is they are looking to make some proposed changes to current episode-based measures, mainly the routine cataract removal. They are looking to change the name. Previously, it was routine cataract removal with IOL implementation. Now they're just changing it to cataract removal with intraocular lens implementation. They are looking to reduce the exclusions. Currently, there are a list of ocular conditions that would exclude patients from being included. They're opening up this a bit and they're adding things back into the measure as glaucoma and macular degeneration so that we are getting a larger pool of patients being included in the measure. And then they also are looking to add a couple other medications to those that would be included as Part B meds. And then that would also then impact those cost calculations if those practices are going to be using any of the medications listed. So always good to stay on top of what those small changes are. There are code files that CMS releases on the QBB website that would actually detail this out for you to stay up to par with what's being counted in this cost measure, because a lot of it kind of hides in the back end. Secondly, what they're proposing in the cost category is a change to the method of scoring. So currently, this is how we're being scored. They look at the cost benchmark on the lower end to the higher end, and they put you into a percentile. Based on that percentile is the possible point value that you're getting. The cost category in 22 was a sticker shock. It is a 30-point impact, and a lot of people were surprised at the impact to their final score. We had been used to getting 100s. All of a sudden, some of us, maxed our points in all other categories, got a 1 or 2 here in cost, and it brought us down to 76s, 77s, which was shocking to many. So CMS is listening to this and actually did a little bit of an evaluation and realized that the average score for cost was 59 out of 100, while the average score for quality was 74 out of 100. Improvement activities is 95, and I think promoting interoperability was 94. So they knew something wasn't fair. For that average to be that dramatically lower to the other categories, they went back and said, how can we better score this? So there is proposal to change the methodology to a standard deviation from the median. So this is an example of one of the episode-based measures. I think this is colonoscopy from within the rule. And what it looks at, it's taking the median cost, and then it's going to do a standard deviation below and above it to then better distribute where providers are falling on the cost benchmark. So the projection, if this is implemented and accepted, would increase that average from 59 to 71. So everybody getting scored on a cost measure in episode-based should see a 12, point type distribution increase based off of this new methodology. So good news there. Hopefully we'll get a few more points there, as well as learning a little bit more about the data files that they're giving you to make some better choices on how you are coding your patients for ocular conditions or other comorbidities, such as even chronic diabetes, to get your risk scores included in there. So good positive change to potentially see not as dramatic of an impact on the cost score in 25. Now, also, in the proposed rule, it is proposing this would retro back to 24. So this would actually, if it passes, would go into effect this year on our cost score and the new way that they would score the distribution of the benchmark. So something good to see there. All right, so what do you do after we've read through all of this? And if you've got comments and you want to share your thoughts on any of these changes, even saying, hey, I'm totally for this, the comment period is open for 60 days. It's closing on September 9th. When you do file or make a comment, you want to refer to the CMS 1807-P, and you can electronically file through regulations.gov. Just follow the submit a comment. And they still take good old regular snail mail, express mail, or overnight mail, but electronically probably is the quick and easy way to make yourself heard on any of your thoughts about these upcoming changes to the MIPS final rule. All right, so let's make sure everybody's still awake. And which category of MIPS do you find the most challenging? I kind of had a gut here. All right, so if we probably all know the most complex and confusing one is cost. And it's pulling up here at the top at 41%, followed by promoting interoperability at 23. And then we've got quality at 19 and improvement activities at 15. So interesting to see that PI is standing up over quality. That's intriguing for me to understand that we definitely have some needs for the PI category and people being clear on those requirements. So thanks for participating. All right, so let's look into MVPs real quick. So CMS is committed to the transformation of the MIPS through the MIPS value pathways. It's a new participation framework to be implemented in the future. This has been on the table for quite a few years. And then in 23, they did release it as a voluntary. And they did this because clinicians were reporting MIPS was too confusing. They believed there were too many choices. Many of the measures are not relevant to specialty practices. And it was leading patients to not be really comparable, like it's not a good comparable provider to provider. So what did they do? They came up with the MIPS value pathway model. And its intent is to replace traditional MIPS in the upcoming years. In the new proposed rule, it is proposing by 2030 that we would truly transition into MVP only and traditional MIPS would retire. I don't know if that'll stay the case, but it is definitely still in the verbiage to end traditional MIPS and become MVP mandatory. The whole purpose of MVP is to really take this 4-quadrant system we've got in MIPS, which is very, separated, and merge it to where it becomes more of a fully implemented, overlapping entity. And in 2025, we are seeing the addition of 6 new proposed NBPs, 1 for ophthalmologic care, 1 for dermatological care, gastro, we've got urologic, we've got pulmonology, and then surgical. So right now, with all of the 20-something NBPs, they state about 80% of providers have an active NBP for them to report. We obviously can't move any program to be mandatory until there are available NBPs for all specialties. I know retina still would have it, and there's still some gaps in this ophthalmologic one that really aren't going to hit all specialties within the different specialty groups. So overall time and pathway would be this. So let's look in a little bit of detail of this reporting. So the foundation layer is going to include the population health measure. This is where you would have to choose one of these to be your 5th quality measure. Now, in the proposed rule, they're stating we're no longer going to have to select it. They basically are going to give you the one you score the better in. If you don't score in either one of them, you would not be scored. So if you aren't doing hospital-based care, most of the time these aren't going to impact you because you're not looking at readmission rates or admission rates for your patients. Now, the quality performance changes from 6 measures to 4. Improvement activities is going to be the same. You just have the 1 high-weighted or 2 mediums, and then we still have the cost categories scoring the same way. It would just depend on what cost categories are in that MVP. So really nothing changes in the overall point values, how we're getting our data. What really changes is the list of measures that we get to choose from. So in the quality for the comprehensive ocular care, you can see the list of 12 or so measures that you would pick 4 from. And again, you can pick from ECQMs, MIPS EQMs, and even some of the registry-based measures. So there's been some addition from the very first rollout of this, of some better measures, but I do know that there's still commentary that it just still really doesn't allow all specialists within ophthalmology to be able to get good measures to report on. So that is something you could add comments to when we talk about sharing feedback to CMS. Second is improvement activities. Now you would pick from this list versus the longer list of 100 or so improvement activities. And then in cost, particularly for ocular care, we're looking at that cataract measure. So really works pretty much the same way. We just have that shorter list of options. And then the last is the promoting interoperability. Again, everything stays the same, and it's regardless of MVP, we're all being still scored on the same key requirements for promoting interoperability. Nothing changes from what we talked about earlier. Still 100 points, still obtained by performance, and still reweighted for those that are in a small practice. So a little bit about MVP, and we are in this webinar series going to be doing a more detailed look into MVP on a dedicated webinar just on MVP, so we can kind of dig a little deeper. All right, so one more poll question. What is your primary goal for participating in MIPS? Maximizing your reimbursement, improving your patient care, meeting regulatory requirements, or other? And this is kind of what I would assume too. So most of us are doing this for the idea of maximizing our reimbursements, taking advantage of positive adjustments. Doing that with strategy is key. About 40% meeting requirements, right? It is a federal law. We want to make sure we're not doing anything that would get anybody, into trouble. And then 7% are doing it for improving patient care, which is kind of, always a catch-22 when we're saying this is quality payment program and a very small percentage are really participating for improvement, and then 3% for other. But yeah, kind of what I thought. Meeting requirements, maximizing reimbursements. So that's going to lead us right into why should you continue with MIPS in 2025? Most of the time, why? Because we have to, right? Most practices don't have the flexibility to just stop taking Medicare and not become responsible to report MIPS. Now, we do see in the experience report that there's been about an 11% drop in the number of MIPS eligible clinicians, and mainly due to an increase in clinicians achieving QP status and becoming members of ACOs. So there are pushes for you to join ACOs, which then would move you into that APM model of the quality payment program versus reporting traditional MIPS. And there is an overall push to try to transition, most and all providers to an ACO model with the shared risk of management. So just an interesting thing. It's a pretty big drop in 1 year, all for providers getting into those ACOs or alternative payment models. So reasons to stay in MIPS, can't afford to lose more money, earn points to avoid a 9% penalty. I kind of get it. Why would you take a hit if you could prevent it? I don't want to give my money to other providers. Let's remember, this is a program where the losers pay the winners. So if you're not participating, you are literally taking your Medicare dollar and giving it to those that do participate. I want to continue to collect more money on Medicare payments. So yeah, put money in your pockets, achieve those positive payment adjustments by having a strategy, staying on top of your MIPS. And then I want to see great scores on Physician Compare. They do share this information out. It is changed in how it's not by MIPS points. They actually put it into a star rating on the Physician Compare website. So if you want those high star ratings, so if somebody did go out and compare you to your peers, you want to make sure that you've got those highest scores out there and get that rock star status. So payment adjustments. So this is a little bit of look of, well, what did people get last year? And last year was the final year of the the exceptional performance bonus. That bonus was there for 5 years, but for 3 of those 5 years, we had COVID and we had no penalties. So the only way we were getting an adjustment was because we had exceptional bonus providers. Because in this game of MIPS, the negatives pay the positives. But if there are no penalties, nobody was getting any money because there was nobody getting penalized. So we saw very small payment adjustments in the times of COVID, but the bulk of them were just because people were getting exceptional performance. So finally in 22, we saw the worlds combine and we saw that people were penalized and we had the exceptional bonus. So in that instance, we had a maximum adjustment of 8.26 if you were to get 100 points. That 75 points, again, was at 0, was neutral, and then we had the in-betweens. So the mean average score or the mean average payment adjustment in 22 for all was 2.6, the main 2.4 for engaged, and for non-providing reporters, it was a negative 3.41 average payment adjustment. So just something to remember that, the numbers are out there. Average scores were about 82, which was what kind of was projected would be the threshold. And they're allowing us to keep it to 75 and still, look at some of these payment adjustments over the next few years. So just some interesting numbers as to what we're seeing for those that are participating. So MIPS payment adjustments, 14% received negative, 7% received neutral, and 79% had positive adjustments. So we definitely are seeing quite a few people participate and again, reap the benefits of those reimbursements, maximizing reimbursements, which is I heard most of you guys say. So some of the FAQs that we kind of always hear is how do I stay on top of changes? How do I monitor my MIPS score? Where do I find training? How do I get scored in previous performance years, or where do I see that information? Do I need to apply for hardships? Are there hardships for COVID? Is it too late to ask for help? So a lot of these are just kind of those reoccurring questions. I'm going to kind of run through them pretty quickly so that we can get 15 good minutes of your Q&A. First and foremost, sign up to get any type of emails from CMS on webinars, trainings. We do have a Compliance Corner newsletter. Make sure you're receiving that. We also have MIPS experts. We have myself, we have Christy, we have Megan. All of us participate in providing consulting services to accounts that sign up for our services. We meet with them monthly. We review strategy on a continual basis to ensure those max points. So lots of ways that you can stay in the know there. How do I monitor my MIPS score? Run those reports every month. Make sure you know what are your performance. Where is it compared to the benchmark? How many points am I achieving? Run your PI reports. Target the best 180 days. Get those gaps quickly because they grow fast and it's almost slower to get them back up. So you definitely want to identify a gap by looking at this data on a more consistent schedule. Train your staff. Follow up that they're being consistent. Once we become complacent on some things, it's amazing how quickly people stop doing it. So just make sure you're constantly reminding them about the requirements, how important they are, that every MIPS point does count. And then continuously check in with your vendor for any updates on those regulatory items. So all different ways that you can stay on top of things and again, ensure those max points. Within NextTech, we have a compliance university. Within the university, for all three of our platforms, there are little how-to guides. There's how-to videos, ClickFlow videos, how to submit QRDA3s. So this is all good information for you out on that community portal. How do you look at your previous year? If you do not have a login for the quality payment program, get one. Everybody or somebody in your practice should have access to the QPP website so that you can see what CMS knows. So basically, if you get your results, you can dig into the details. Right now, the 23 scores were just released. They're preliminary. Targeted reviews haven't opened, but you can at least see what your cost scores are. They have included those for 23 now. They also have added in a supplemental cost file new this year that wasn't there last year. So lots of things out there for you to really get an idea of what you reported last year, what your score is. They just haven't released the adjustments. They won't do that until they push out the final scores at the end of typically November. But each category will give you those details to drill into your performance. Should you apply for hardships? Again, for the promoting interoperability category, you're automatically applied if you're a small practice. Other ways is if you've had a decertification of your EHR, insufficient internet, you had an uncontrollable circumstance such as a tornado, a fire, or you have lack of control of the availability of your cert. There is verbiage in the proposed rule to add something here about a third-party entity submitting data that was not, or they did not submit data that they had agreed to send. So there would be something in an agreement, didn't happen, and they're adding a way for you to then be able to apply for a hardship due to those type of circumstances. So that is something new in the proposal that is looking to be approved. So for 2024, EUC hardships. So there is not a hardship for COVID anymore. It is no longer an option. What has been added as an option is the malware cyber attack to change healthcare. So this year, if there has been an impact to your practice that is limited your ability to report your quality, you can apply specifically for that in addition to the other circumstances that they typically have for that EUC hardship. But make sure if you're applying for them, you can demonstrate that impact, particularly for an extended period of time. Last, is it too late to ask for help? I mean, we never say it's too late. MIPS is a every day, every month of every year entity. So we can help with MIPS health checks. If you are a NextTech client and you haven't had a health check, you definitely could reach out to your ISM or CSM and we could get them scheduled. And we also have our CAS monitor and MIPS services, which basically, master MIPS services, which are a hands-on team effort to ensure max points, maximum reimbursement from anything from setting strategy, assisting with attestation, training your teams, all that good fun stuff. So lots of good ways that we can definitely help you with getting into, and then there was my last poll. We already did that. So it was just in the wrong place. So I probably talked enough, and hopefully everybody's still awake. And I would like to just open it up. And Christy, if you want to I haven't been able to keep up too much, but I think you can summarize where we've had some questions, and hopefully we can
Absolutely. So, I haven't had a whole lot of questions. So if you have any questions, bring them through. A lot of it was we can't hear you, slides aren't moving, kind of things like that. So I
Oh
was
man.
answering them it wasn't too many. That was at the beginning. So I think it cleared
Okay.
up after that. But I did reiterate, there will be a recorded version of this if you are signed up for the webinar that will come to you. And I know I could hear it just fine on my end. So I'm sure the recording is absolutely fine. One question that I just received was quality reports. ICP and ICP are taking 48 plus hours to export. And I did write back on that, just stating that for that software, you do have to queue your reports. It would take 24 hours for them to run, depending on when you queued them. Heather, do you know anything about it taking longer than that? And I
It
did
is,
suggest that they call
yeah,
support if it does, but is something going on that I'm not aware of?
not globally to the point that it's been, I do know there's times if I run it, it doesn't, it has not been there. I think size of practice, Stephanie, tends to be an issue on that I've noticed and when I run into it. I will say it is on our roadmap to be able to run reports live. There's some discussion of doing a kind of like a copy of the database just for report running. So it is a known issue that we've got to wait that 24 hours. So hopefully as this roadmap gets identified and we work through it, we'll be able to get that. But if it is taking more than that second run, please submit support tickets. So if you're not seeing it by 48 hours and you run it again and it's not there and that's happening consistently, definitely let's get it to support.
Perfect, perfect. And now I did get a really good question, which I really like. Where do I go to start? We were made aware last week that one of our physicians is eligible to report. We have never done this. I contacted NextTech and all I was given was an email to sign up for this webinar.
You want to go for it, Christy?
Yeah,
Come
absolutely.
on.
So it's never too late to start, number one. If you would like to work with a consultant, either myself, Heather, Megan, your CSM would be the place to start to ask for those services, which we can do. But also remember you have, and we would love to work with you for sure. It's not too late. I'm sure there's some type of data that you have, and submitting something is better than submitting nothing, because that penalty is on a sliding scale. So everyone forgets that. And so I always say, if you have something, submit something, because if you don't submit anything and you get a 0, you're going to have that 9% penalty. So we can always, if you want to put the name of your practice in the chat, you can do that. And I can reach out to your client success manager myself and let them know that you're interested, and we can send you some information about that. But it is never too late to start, because I guarantee you have data and you just have not ran those reports or have that data at your fingertips.
Correct.
Perfect. I did get your information, so I will reach out to your client success manager and make sure that they reach out to you.
And I would definitely make sure, Ann, you get at the quality payment program, which is qpp.cms.gov, is to go ahead and, if you're going to be the one in control or managing it, go ahead and create a QPP account and get attached to your practice so you can see previous year data. That's going to be helpful for you, an overall understanding of what has been happening previously, and then use that to make your strategy plan for this year.
Perfect, perfect. If you don't hear anything, I would definitely reach, if for some reason, but I'm going to track it really closely to make sure that someone actually gets a hold of you to make sure we can get things rolling as soon as possible. Anything else? Any other questions? Anything? If you have anything, please ask. This is the perfect time.
Or even just some feedback of what you think CMS is, the idea of the cost score changing. I just like to see anybody's feedback on program changes. Sounds good. This MIPS game is fun. I don't know.
anyone who is on that has attested in the past, make sure you're out there and you're checking those scores that have come through. And if you don't agree with someone, let your voice be heard. Do a targeted review and make sure that you let your voice be heard of what it is. You know, sometimes we think that it doesn't make a difference, but I do know for a fact last year, maybe the year before, we did some targeted reviews and things had changed with the scores that had came out this year. So that's very important. Love this. MIPS is not fun, Heather. I hate it already.
Nice.
Regarding so one more here. Regarding it's, you know, us MIPS experts, we it's a game, so we make it into a fun game is what we try to do. But I still think that's hilarious. Regarding the new vaccine measure, is it having all three or just one or two?
The way I interpret it's all three, because it was a percentage of each one. So it was like 60% for COVID, 80 influenza, right? And like 95 Hep B. So it was all three of them.
All right, let's see what else I have. I've covered a few. I do appreciate you doing these webinars. Our practice does monthly MIPS training for our staff. That's amazing. Great job.
Love it. We had a group. I had a group. She did like a MIPS news. No, she gave like MIPS rewards at her staff meetings each month, like something unique, just to keep everybody's radar on it. I thought it was pretty fun.
Is it common to constantly have to reach out to our vendor that merges with our EHR to have them do a targeted review of our data? We use DataDerm for contact. So I'm thinking what I'm understanding here is you're possibly monitoring your DataDerm, and correct me if I'm wrong, your DataDerm measures, and they're not correct. You're not met, should be met, or you have met people who should be not met, if I'm understanding that correctly. Because I work with quite a few clients through the DataDerm registry also, and I see that a lot. You know, my main advice is to reach, you have to monitor your data. That is very important. You're attesting that your data is correct, so please monitor your data. Keep screenshots of what you're doing, log those tickets, make sure that you're going to do a random audit. If you're a large practice or even a smaller practice, you have 5,000 patients in the numerator and denominator, no one can expect you to check all 5,000 patients, but you do need to make sure that you're doing an audit to make sure that it's pulling correctly. I see that all the time. So, yes, you're going to see issues like that.
And there is a change, and I know our ophthalmology group works with a similar entity. They were with FIG, moved to Verana, and the AAD is also making that transition from FIG to a new company starting next year. So hopefully some of those nuances will be solved with the newer partnerships. So just something to keep on the radar there also.
In 2025, will you recommend that ophthalmologists volunteer for MVP? Is it better to learn how to do MVP early or stick to what is working? What's the best strategy?
I always believe if we can get in early and see which one pans out better, we'll do both, right? Because you can technically do both, report MVP and MIPS, and you would get scored the higher of the two. So if you can get in early and we can see, I've got a couple groups that, I'm going to talk to and say, let's just try it both ways and see. Because if it's easier, because we only have 4 measures, that's really the only change. It's 2 less measures you got to track. But I definitely wouldn't go all in year one. I would definitely do both and then just make sure what we anticipate will happen with MVP does.
Yes, and then I'm going to go back to the question that was with the DataDerm. I was on the right track, and so I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding the question correctly. So yes, I'm doing the same thing. I'm constantly logging tickets. I have noticed that this year at this time, a lot of my clients' data is a lot better than it has been in the past. But as Heather said, there is going to be a change coming. I'm sure everybody had received that email, and we are hoping for a better outcome when it comes to that. We are working really closely with that data puller to kind of help them understand how our software works. Has the MIPS templates in the Next Tech EHR always existed, or is this a new development? How often is it recommended to complete this template for a patient if they are seen more than once per year? I'll take that. So MIPS templates, I think we've had those out for almost 5 years. So it was something new about 5 years ago. We do have templates that will come out every beginning of the year. You got to kind of give it a couple of weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the beginning of the year. We try to get them out as soon as possible after that final rule is released. And then all the measures are analyzed so that we can make sure they're in there properly. So we suggest that you, once those come in, if you're on cloud-based, you will see them come into your software. If you're server-based, you would have to ask to have those imported, or you can go to the community portal to get them. So you are going to change them. If a patient, if it's a measure that's once per reporting year and a patient is seen multiple times, the thing about changing templates is you have them pulled over from chart to chart. So once you've answered it once, it will pull over. And then at the beginning of the year, when you have to answer it again and you change your templates, it won't pull over. That's the whole point of it, so that you will know that that was answered at least once. So if you're doing falls once per reporting year and you answer it once, you have it pull forward to the next note. That way, you know you had already answered it for that year. Beginning of the next year, you change your templates and then you start all over.
Correct. And if you're on cloud, those will automatically be added. If you're on prem, you do need to request them or get support to help you get them on, just so you know.
Okay, and then we're gonna end soon, but I've had 3 more questions that I'm gonna answer just because they were in before the time. Can you explain the difference in the cost measure routine cataract versus IOLs?
Yeah, there was just the name change, if I'm understanding it correctly. They didn't change. The only thing they changed was the name. They added some ocular conditions and they added some medications, but it is still the same cost measure. It's just some changes, if I'm understanding that is what you need clarification on.
How do you change the templates? For the product that has the templates sent to them that we create every year, you will get them in your software if you're on the cloud, and then you would insert them into your note, create an item that says bring in MIPS, however you would want to do that. And that way they'll come into your notes, and then you would just have to change that out once a year. Most of my clients, I have an area that says bring in MIPS. I hide it behind something. It's an item. And then every year, all I do is change out my bring in MIPS item. Makes it very easy. So then all of my templates are updated. And then last here, we'll enter this one last one. So if I'm understanding the IA proposed change correctly for 2025, we only have to do one. There's no waiting anymore.
That is correct. So they took away waiting, and then it's one activity if you're a small practice, 2 activities if you're a large.
All right, and that was the end of the questions at this time, Heather.
All right, well, thank you all for your attention and joining us, and we are happy to hear that these are helpful because that's our goal. We will be having one pretty much each month up until the end of the year, and now that you've registered for this one, you should get registration or reminders on all the upcoming ones, and we'll be excited to talk MIPS again.
Thank you for joining.
Thanks, guys.